So, this is an interview with Terrell Jean Pettengill in the family tradition of documenting the elder folks of the family.
There we go.
It is February 12th, 2015.
Right.
So, I figured maybe we would start at the beginning.
Oh my.
Or maybe a little bit before the beginning, and I would ask you about your parents and where they came from.
Well, sure. We're Northwest Iowans and generally of English-German extraction.
Yeah.
Uh,
Generations and generations ago.
right. The English side of the family having entered the country in 1641, and the German family much later. My grandmother was born in Indian Territory, Oklahoma. So.
And was her family an immigrant family?
German,
Yeah.
Kellenberger, and then Metzger originally, but much later than the Pettengels.
Yeah. I figured like the German influx was a lot later anyway.
Right, exactly. So, my parents grew up starting in the 20s and were products of the Depression.
Mm-hmm.
Although I don't think that they noticed it in particular, in that their families were landed families that had some wherewithal, and they started at a higher level. So if things sank during that period, they didn't sink to an uncomfortable level.
Do you think the part of the country that they were in had an effect on that as well?
Well, it wasn't urban.
Yeah. I feel like it might have been more noticeable with bread lines and stuff around.
I know that my grandfather, who ran a building supply operation that he owned, bartered pigs for cement and that sort of thing.
Oh, okay.
So there was some of that going on because people didn't have cash.
Yeah.
But that influenced my parents, and I think made them cautious, and they taught us values that I still suffer from today.
Yeah.
In that I'm sometimes
Price conscious?
price conscious. What is it called? Penny wise, pound foolish. Yes.
Yeah, I think I got a little bit of that from you too.
Yeah.
It's a little bit more awareness of what things cost.
Yeah.
So did they grow up in the same town, knowing each other?
No. They grew up in the same county.
Is that Lyon County?
Lyon County. My mother, Bonola. Odd name, story behind that also, but she grew up in what was called West County, and it was the northwesterly county of Iowa, so it was bordered by South Dakota and Minnesota, which had an influence later on also. And she grew up in West County in a little town called Larchwood, which was literally populated by larchwood trees, and actually a farm just outside of that. And my father was in the county seat, which sounds bigger.
Yeah.
And it was a bit bigger, but it was still tiny. And so they're probably, by today's travel time, about 20 minutes apart. Which doesn't sound like anything to an urban person, but to a rural person, that's a distance.
Yeah.
And so they didn't know each other. They may have known of each other.
Right. Okay.
And then met at the Lester dances. There was I think it might have been a bowling alley or something like that, but upstairs in that two-story building, which is one of the few larger buildings in Lester, Iowa. There was a dance hall, and in the 30s, people would drive over there in their Ford Model A's and go to dances, and they were pretty significant dances in that bands that later on became famous, like Lawrence Welk, played there.
Oh, cool.
And it was the beginning of the big band era,
I see.
the 30s,
Yeah.
which World War II spread around the world, and so that's how they met.
It
And
sounds like a lot of fun.
yeah, and they really, it was a period of broad exploration and discovery.
So would they have been teenagers then? Or a little
Mm,
older?
some of them would have been late teens, some of them early 20s, probably little before college age, I guess. Mother did go to college.
They both, and was that still unique for a woman in her time to go to?
Oh my, yes. It was.
And was that a 4-year degree, or did she have like an associate's, like 2 years?
She went to the University of Northern Iowa,
Mm-hmm.
which today is a football power
Yeah.
in eastern Iowa, and just to journey to eastern Iowa was a big deal. But I think that she got an associate degree in education
Right. Yeah.
To teach. And my father went to Minneapolis, which I'm sure was a big deal for him, in that it was an urban
Yeah.
circumstance. And the difference between living in that tiny, tiny village, 2,500 people on the windswept plains of Iowa, and a city, it still is astonishing.
That must have been a culture shock. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I thought I'd seen pictures of them from college, from the college age. So they got together before they.
I think they did.
Yeah.
I think it
Or
was,
at least they were in the same friendship circle. It wasn't clear whether they were a couple in any of those pictures.
I think that my father dated the woman who was to become his sister-in-law first.
Oh, really?
I mean, I don't know that it was more than, a beer.
Right, yeah.
But
that's interesting.
so it was a small group, and there weren't a lot of people.
Right.
I mean, Lyon County today is probably, 100,000 people.
Wow. Not much has changed.
The whole county.
Right, yeah.
If that.
Yeah, I mean, compared to around here with the density we have, that's just amazing.
Yeah. So I think that they met before they left, and then got married shortly after they got back. My parents were married in her grandparents' house in the county seat.
Okay. And do you have any idea of how they decided to settle in Rock Rapids?
Well, yes, that's where my grandfather's business was.
Okay, so it was already there. Is that the same? Is it Pettengill Concrete and Gravel? Is that still the same company?
It's called Pettengill Concrete and Lumber in those days, and yes, yeah,
Okay.
that was it. And both my father and his older brother worked there. It was the logical thing to do.
Yeah.
If you weren't going to go away.
Mm-hmm.
I think my father did want to go away. He wanted to be an architect, and he started in that direction, and then World War II intervened.
Yeah, I was going to ask if World War II had an influence on what they decided to do.
Well, his brother, Uncle Jigger was his nickname. His formal name was Roscoe Robert, and Roscoe volunteered and went into the army and ended up in the North African campaign against Rommel and all of that, and was standing next to the ambulance that he drove. That was his job, as the ambulance driver. And another vehicle rolled over a landmine, and it blew up, and he got hit in the stomach or the abdomen with a piece of shrapnel. Wasn't a life-threatening injury, but he ended up in a hospital recovering in London. And while he was there, he decided that he would help as an orderly.
Huh.
And he was so useful that he became part of that part of the army and ended up back in Kansas at Fort Leavenworth as an orderly, and therefore survived the war.
Wow, talk about lucky.
My father had a heart murmur,
mm-hmm.
So when you listen to his heart, he's trying to get into the army. It made a swooshing sound, and so he tried the army. They said no. He tried the navy, and they said no. And
Sounds like the beginning of Captain America.
yeah, he tried the Air Force, and they, I think, said yes, but oh, it wasn't the Air Force, the Army Air Corps. Uh, but just at that point, he got a letter saying, "You are the sole remaining at-home son of an invalid." My grandfather had lost a leg through a blood clot,
My goodness.
phlebitis they used to call it, and therefore, and he is in a war necessary industry, which is the building products industry. So you have to stay home and help your father run the business. That's your job.
Huh. So it's almost like being drafted home.
Yeah, except that he was really disappointed.
Yeah, well, I mean,
He really wanted to go to war like everybody else, and felt that keenly. Interesting.
Yeah.
But obviously he survived the war too, and he was home to have babies.
Yeah.
So he had my sister in 1942, I think, maybe 41, and that was well before the tide of the war had turned. It was not at all clear that the so-called democracies were going to win.
Yeah.
It looked like the Axis was going to win, and then by the time I was born in October of 1943, the tide had turned.
Things were looking up.
Things were looking up. I think D-Day had happened, if I'm remembering my timing correctly, and we were starting to push the Axis powers back.
It was still 2 years before the war ended, though, right?
Yes.
So you were very much of the generation of war babies.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah. I'm not a baby boomer.
No,
before that.
Yeah, you missed the cutoff.
And that's had an influence all through my life.
Yeah, I think I can notice the difference between the generation that you were in and the baby boomer generation that is the generation of a lot of my friends' parents. But they're just a little bit younger.
Mm-hmm.
You know, though people had kind of gotten over the war and things were on the upswing economically, and they were born right into that.
It's a different mentality.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they were born into good times are here again.
Yeah.
And it was. I mean, that was a boom time for America. So yeah, like that. Tiny village in Iowa, windswept plains of Iowa, so cold in the winter that you stepped out the door and the warm air in your lungs would be sucked out by the inversion in temperature.
How cold does it get? Because I think the coldest I've been in is -7.
Like that.
Like that? Okay. No, that's only been maybe once. I
Yeah.
was walking home from a casino.
Yeah, and you don't want to be out in it for very long.
No, I think it would have been very unpleasant if I hadn't been drinking.
Yeah, you weren't feeling it so much.
Oh, yeah.
But it was a sweet place to grow up. It was a Tom Sawyer kind of place to grow up on the Rock River. Not dramatic from a geological perspective.
No, very flat.
Yeah, very flat, but not utterly flat. It rolls a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
It rises and falls.
I remember, I mean, it has to because there have to be a little bit of rapids for it to be named Rock
Yeah,
Rapids.
there you go.
I think I remember seeing that little section where it's just a little bit.
But literally a sea of corn.
Yeah.
Corn in every direction, or soybeans, or something green. And you come up over a hill and you see a copse of trees ahead. That's usually a town.
Huh.
Because that's where the trees are, other than groves around farmhouses.
So, were you? I heard a friend on James's softball team talking about getting lost in cornfields, where you're never supposed to turn. If you lose your direction, you're supposed to keep going straight, or else you'll be in there forever. Were you taught stuff like that?
No, I don't think so. I don't think I've ever. I may have been lost a couple of times in a cornfield. I mean, they stand 12 feet high.
Well, I know if you're a kid, you can't. Yeah.
Yeah.
You have no idea where to go.
So yeah, it was fun. Lots of relatives. Family reunion every Sunday evening.
Wow.
Sunday afternoon.
Because everyone was in driving distance.
Yeah.
Huh.
So there'd be a family reunion of 20, 25 people at Nadine's house.
And did that coalesce around church? Was that?
It was after church.
Mm.
Definitely people went to church, although Nadine and Jigger were not church-going people.
Mm.
His
Your aunt and uncle.
Well, his mother,
Mm.
Christina Pettengill, my grandfather VH's wife, was a Jesus freak. I mean, she was just smitten by the idea of Christ and his doings. And we had to control her in her later life because she was giving her money away to every charity that came along, Christian charity.
Yeah.
And it was a little hard to be around her because she was proselytizing all the time.
Yeah, that's tough.
Yeah.
So he just went the other direction then, or
Who?
Jigger? He said.
Oh, Jigger and Nadine, they just were modern folks.
Yeah.
They were believed in science.
Yeah.
And they were
went in the secular direction.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, they were matter of fact.
Mm-hmm.
And Christianity might have some facts in it. Mostly seems like fantasy, but
Yeah.
Anyway, they didn't go to church, and my father did. Father was a deacon of the church and sang in the choir and worked hard at it, but he was never preachy about it. He just.
This is what you did.
It was a personal religion, sort of personal belief on his part, and therefore my mother took me. I remember as a little boy, the way she controlled me in church was to rub my head. And to this day, you can really get my attention by rubbing my head. So, anyway, the family reunion followed on Sunday afternoons.
So I was gonna pull out this picture of you.
You have to put it really close.
Yeah, I'll get it close. But I kind of want to see if we can kind of keep the comparison here a little bit.
How old do you think I was there?
I don't know, maybe 4.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, because you look like you know what's going on.
Yeah, oh, definitely.
Yeah, I like how it's there's a black and white photo that's been colored in.
Oh yeah.
Did you do that, or is that how?
Oh
it was?
no, I didn't have anything to do with it. Yeah.
So you said you were a handful as a little boy.
I was a full-on experimenter. I mean, I just couldn't be trusted. There were a handful of childless couples that my parents hung out with, and sometimes we would visit their house, and they would have things out on the end tables and the coffee tables that were not child aware.
Yeah.
And I was just twirling them and twittering them and turning them upside down and bouncing them and using them as toys. And they said, "Don't stop." And I'd stop, and they'd start talking again, and then I'd be somewhere else doing it again. You know, it wasn't that I was malicious; I was just immensely curious.
Yeah.
I still am.
Yeah. It's interesting. It's an interesting perspective to have on your own parents, like what kind of child you were. What was the story of you stealing your grandfather's cane?
Apparently, I did. I don't remember.
You don't remember it?
I don't remember that.
I remember reading it in your baby book. Your mom had written in there. I think maybe 2 years old, and it was one of your favorite things to do.
Yeah, right. Yeah, he was the guy who had lost a leg. So, yeah.
I think I know I've asked you this before, but what is your first memory?
Some people, like you guys, you and your sister, seem to remember things immensely.
Yeah, my husband still thinks I'm making it up.
So early that it's hard to believe, but I think it was the competition arriving. my little 4 years later brother in the bassinet in the living room of our first house I remember there were those
It's still going.
those ochre pull down shades, roll down shades,
Mm-hmm.
and they produced a kind of an ochre light when they were down, even on a very sunny day. The whole room was bathed in that ochre light,
Yeah.
and I remember coming up as a 4-year-old to his bassinet and being able to just get my nose over looking at him, and the emotion I remember, I don't remember anything other than the environment and the emotion, was, this is not good. This is trouble.
So did your fears pan out? What was your relationship like with a?
I think for him it did, because I was bigger than he was and more skilled, and I just
Took advantage of
I
it.
terrorized him for years. Poor kid.
Oh, God. Yeah.
Uh,
It comes with the territory of having an older sibling.
yeah,
I kind of lucked out in that department with being born with an equal match.
yeah, right. Although you were burlier.
Yeah, that's true.
Um, but that, I think, is my earliest memory.
Mhm.
Lots of other little things, like my grandfather made this is before Toys R Us,
Mhm.
a little car, sort of in the shape of a Nash Rambler, but it was a toy, and you could sit in it,
Okay.
and you could turn it. It was built on a lawnmower chassis,
Huh.
and there was a steering wheel and so forth. And
It's almost like a soapbox car kind of thing.
no, it really had the shape of a car,
Oh, okay.
and it was painted red, and I was pushed in it. You'd get in it, and somebody would give you a shove, and you'd go for a little while. So it was heavy.
Oh, okay.
It wasn't light like today's version.
Like solid wood kind
It
of.
was, yeah, it was
Yeah.
made of wood. He owned a lumber yard.
Yeah.
And then, so believe it or not, he put a 2-cycle, automobiles are 4-cycle, he put a 2-cycle washing machine engine in it, a Maytag engine.
Really?
And it didn't make a continuous sound that you think of a gasoline engine making today. It made a pop, 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 pop sound because it was a 2-cycle.
Mm-hmm.
It just went boom, 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 boom. That's it.
Yeah.
And you put that in there, and it was overpowered. So when you stepped down on the accelerator, it took off.
Oh my gosh.
I particularly remember that because at one point I lost control of it and ran a paint line all along my father's car
Oh
at
no.
about ankle height. So that was an early memory.
Did you remember because you got in trouble or because you were afraid you would?
I remember feeling badly about having done it, and my father was very upset.
Yeah. What was your relationship with your sister like growing up?
To the degree that I was the child that caused trouble all the time, she was just the perfect little girl.
Yeah.
And she was very concerned about being well behaved and very sweet, and she always was supportive, and she mothered me, and she was right through to today, but through high school she helped me find my way.
So she really was a mentoring older sibling.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, sometimes you got to like get out of here,
Yeah.
But
Sure it
but she was always there for me. Yeah. Yeah, we really had a good relationship. In fact, we had the same coloring, and I was big for my age, so I always appeared to be same age as she,
Mm-hmm.
and same coloring. People would say thought we were twins,
Huh.
Fraternal twins.
So, even when you were a child, did you look older than you were, look bigger than other kids?
I looked mature based on that picture of the 4-year-old.
Yeah, who knows? Maybe you're 2 in that picture.
Yeah, I was always older looking than I was.
And it's still true. I always wonder, like, what a unique experience that must be.
Well, for um, some years it was great because I dated older girls and I was assumed to be more mature than I was.
So you got some privileges earlier.
I played to it all the time.
Well, I remember you getting senior discounts when you were 50.
Yeah, right, exactly. And then the family, it turns gray in 30s.
Yeah, I've got gray hair.
Late 20s, 30s.
Yeah, I got my first gray hair when I was 23.
Yeah.
But it hasn't advanced much.
It's an English thing, in fact.
Oh, yeah.
It's a strain that runs through Englishmen turning gray early. And then as I got into my 30s, I found that I had sort of appearance gravitas without trying.
Kind of like a Don Draper factor?
Well, more like Don, not the other guy that plays his.
Oh, right. Yes, his partner.
His partner, yeah, who's gray. You know.
So like the Silver Fox power thing.
It was sort of like that. You
Okay.
know, I looked a little older than I was, and I was in the Silicon Valley consulting to people my age or a little bit younger,
Mm-hmm.
and having them accept me as someone who knew what he was talking
An
about.
authority, yeah.
Which, of course, I was making it up most of the time.
Something reminded me of a story that you had told at one time. Cousin Martin posted some pictures of hooking up the front hood of a truck to the back of a four-wheeled vehicle
Oh, yeah.
and to make a sled. Except their modifications that they welded a couch to it as well, which I don't think was a step that you took. But I remember you telling me a story of something like that growing up in the winter.
So dangerous.
Right.
We had the hood of a 1930s car came to a point like a boat.
Uh-huh.
It obviously turned so that you were sitting inside the hood and hooked a rope to the thing somehow. Put it behind a car, put it in a ditch filled with snow, and then drove the car down the country road with the sled, which is just full of jagged metal, going through the ditch. And then every now and then you'd hit a farmer's roadway into his field, and so the thing would go, oh, like that. You know? And, you know, we survived a lot of really stupid things like that. And how did we do it? Of course, there were no seat belts in that day.
Yeah.
In those days. Certainly no exploding balloons to protect you.
Yeah.
No airbags. You know,
Fewer people on the road, though.
Well, there were fewer people on the road. That's one thing, yeah. But we learned to drive with one hand because we had our other hand around our girl. It's like Fonzie.
That sounds like a country song, actually. The only thing that's missing is beer.
Yeah.
So when you did that, you guys were old enough to drive, or did you just have access to a car?
No, we were old. Somebody was old enough to drive.
Okay.
Yeah. No, I don't think we drove before we were 16.
Mm. It wasn't like people knew how to drive because they were driving tractors or anything?
Oh, sure. Oh, we all drove earlier on the company, on the well, in my case, company, but in most cases, farm land.
Yeah.
I mean, kids were driving at age 9.
Huh.
Driving the little tractor back and forth from the grain wagon.
Yeah.
Taking it very seriously.
Yeah, I bet. It's a big responsibility. But you grew up in town, right?
I was a townie.
Yeah.
2,500 people, a townie, big deal.
Yeah.
Well, that's all we knew.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it seemed like, I know I've gone through your high school yearbooks.
Uh-huh.
That was one of my favorite things to do as a kid, is looking through them because they looked so dated.
Oh, yeah, no, they sure
You know,
are.
everyone had the same short haircut, the same wide rimmed black glasses.
Yeah, and even little tiny ties.
Well, didn't they made you all wear the same thing on picture day or something like that?
I don't think they made you. I think it was there was a great deal of conformity in
Yeah.
those small Protestant towns. You conformed without thinking about you being. It was picture day, so that's why you dressed.
Mm-hmm.
You know, did the rules go out? No. What the mothers just knew because that's what they did.
Huh.
You know.
It seemed like you were involved in a few different clubs and sports, and
Yeah.
were there any sports you didn't play?
Your co-curriculars.
Yeah.
I was not on the varsity basketball team.
Did you play baseball?
There wasn't baseball.
Oh, there wasn't.
Hmm.
Was it just not popular? Or?
Well, no. Baseball was sort of a town. It wasn't a high school sport. It was a town sport.
Oh, okay.
In the summertime, there were lots of baseball fields, and baseball was played, but it wasn't a
So it's almost
school
like
district.
it's almost like the way that I played soccer. It wasn't like something through the school.
That's right.
Oh, okay.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Baseball was popular and exciting, and hot summer Iowa, humid events. You know,
Yeah.
there's something to do. Go there and they played the Star Spangled Banner. You know, the whole thing.
It really does sound like a movie. Like
It
this
is.
one.
It goes through my mind like a movie. And
Yeah.
when I see movies made from that period, I relate.
That must be interesting. Having. Do you remember when it was when what you remembered as your childhood suddenly became a period piece?
Oh gosh.
Because that hasn't happened to me quite yet, but I think it's really, really close.
Yeah. There was the last picture show, which was a movie set in Texas about small town life. That struck me as, they're talking about our period. you
Yeah.
know? And I don't know when that was made, but probably in the 60s. So it was 20 years later.
Yeah, so I'm getting up to the point where it's almost 20 years after when I was really starting to become aware of what was going on.
Yeah.
So I know you also ran track.
Yeah.
And you played football.
Football was the biggie.
Yeah. That sounds like the right part of the country for football being.
I was a hurdler in track.
Yeah.
And I remember being left behind by the coach as a demonstration of how much I needed to improve. And he took the track team off to the Sioux relays, and he said, "You stay home and practice these high hurdles until you get it right."
Do you remember what you were doing wrong?
Yeah, steps.
Oh, the number of steps?
Number of steps. Yeah.
Okay, so he was probably trying to get you to not switch legs.
Well, whatever it was, I was
probably
out there practicing alone, and caught my trailing foot on a hurdle, put my arm out to catch myself, and broke my wrist.
Yeah. I remember, I've heard that story before, and it always just strikes me as like, these days, you just never would have been alone.
Yeah.
That's kind of like an era thing. Like,
I was,
your parents would have thrown a fit knowing you'd been left alone.
I was not only alone, but it was twilight.
Oh dear.
It wasn't a bad break. I mean, it's never had any effect on me.
It doesn't hurt when it rains or anything?
No.
My one injury like that, when I broke my finger playing goalie in soccer, it hurts.
You still notice it?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, sometimes if I'm not sure the weather prediction's going to be right, it'll let me know.
But I went back to my, let's say, 50th class reunion recently, and
My first one's this year.
Oh, your first one.
Uh-huh.
All right. First one you've been to?
No, the first one. We have a 10-year reunion. It's been 10 years since I graduated high school.
Okay. And the quarterback of that football team, 1960 to 61 football in Iowa, still lives in Rock Rapids. He runs the little country club there.
Did he peak in high school?
And so he married the coach's daughter.
Oh.
And they settled down in Rock Rapids after several other things. And he runs the country club. He runs a golf course.
Mm-hmm.
And when we went back to the 50th, he had me, the fullback, one of the other guards, a couple of us, a handful of us, to his house, and he had all of the black and white films
Oh my god.
of our games.
Someone was filming them.
Oh yeah,
Wow.
they were training films. You know.
Oh, okay. So you could see what you're doing right
Yeah,
and wrong.
right.
What
right.
was your position again?
On offense, I played pulling guard, back up, go around the side, make a block, and on defense, and we played both sides. I was defensive end, and that was important in that I intercepted a pass and ran for a touchdown.
Oh, that must have felt good.
Pretty unusual, and I saw that on film.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that's funny.
Yeah. So wait, would that have been 2011? Yeah. Right?
When I was back there,
Yeah.
something like that.
Yeah.
And so I ended up being named on the All Iowa football team that my senior year, and that was just a sort of a notice honorarium. I don't know how that happened. Somebody must have put me in for it, and got recruited by colleges and ended up going to the football program at the University of South Dakota.
Oh, I didn't know you were recruited for football.
You're
I
right.
never knew that.
Where I played, I think, like 4 practices and came down with mononucleosis and stopped and went into journalism.
I see. Well, you were on the yearbook or journalism in high school, or was it
Yearbook and yeah, the yearbook.
yearbook?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that was one of these pictures was from that.
I cartooned. Oh yeah, that's this one here.
Yeah.
This
Let's
is
see if we
me
can
as-
get this close up here.
This is me as the editor of the
Taking care of business there.
right.
A very, very period looking picture.
Yeah. Of the yearbook. That's
So did you write this tagline, 1960-61 yearbook, better than ever?
no, I didn't. But, I don't know where this is. Big Bob Ide. He was an unusually tall, big fellow. I liked him a lot. And Sandra Zieprada, very pretty young woman, and she was at the 50th. Unbeknownst to me, she had terminal cancer at that time and died shortly thereafter. So there's a whole loop in that picture.
Yeah, it must be even more fascinating to go to those sort of things without the sort of knowledge that Facebook gives people my generation, where James and I went to his reunion in December, and we knew a lot of what people were up to. There wasn't a whole lot of revelation.
Uh-huh.
There weren't a lot of people who looked drastically different that you hadn't seen a picture of already.
Well, you could have stayed in touch.
Yeah.
In this generation, it's just the Facebook is like having instant letters from your folks.
Yeah. So how big was your high school? Was it the sort of school where you knew everybody's name?
No, it was the whole school was maybe 250 people.
Okay.
About the size of your class,
Yeah.
probably. And I think my class was probably 50 people.
Yeah.
And I didn't even know all of the people in my class.
Yeah.
We were very stratified by townies versus farm kids, by townies depending on which side of the river you lived on.
Oh,
I
really?
have to work at having prejudice in a town.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
But we
it all
succeeded.
sounds like a stretch. I guess that's kind of like the difference in my high school between people from Mill Valley and people from Bolinas.
Yeah, exactly, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And so, no, I didn't know everybody's name. And there were the popular kids and the people who were more marginalized. There were smaller groups, and there were sort of the townies who were children of the merchants, the big merchants, and the contractors and
Like the rich kids?
professional. Well, didn't have to do with wealth so much, although that would tend to be the case. And so ended up in a situation where more people knew my name. Now, of course, it was on signs all over town than I knew. So
Mhm.
they'd walk by and say Terry, and I think, I don't know who that is. I recognize their face, but can't remember their name.
Yeah.
That kind of thing.
Hmm.
Part of that was having your personal name as a brand
Yeah.
in town.
It was on on all the trucks, right?
It was on trucks. It was on factories. It was on retail shops.
So, of the stratified groups, which one did you fall into?
Well, townies, professional people, merchants.
So, a lot of your friends were children of those families
Yeah.
as well?
Yes, and there were exceptions to every rule, but
Yeah.
Anne Fisher was a very close friend of my sister's, and therefore to some degree mine. And her father was a local attorney,
Okay.
head of a firm there. Peterson was my father's competitor in the building supply business.
And you guys are always next to each other in the yearbook.
Yes, right. Peterson and Pettengill, and we're still in touch.
Hmm.
We still communicate via email and so forth.
Did you have a best friend growing up?
A number. Ron Dykstra lived near me, and while he was a little more nerdy than I was. We're still in touch. I've been to his home in the last few years.
Where does he live?
Sioux Falls, South Dakota.
Okay.
And Peterson lives in Northern California, so I hear and see him every now and then. Gosson, his mother, his parents were divorced. His mother lived above a retail store downtown in the village, and but he was just an exceptional young fella, and he and I are still in touch. He lives in Louisville, Kentucky, and others. Yeah, so yeah.
So it sounded like you had a good number of friends then.
Yeah, Lyle Wilkie lives in Kansas City. Still exchange Christmas cards with him and that sort of thing. Yeah. So yeah, some connections that stayed up with.
Yeah.
Mostly men, not women, for some reason.
But it sounds like you had friends who were girls, though.
I did, yeah. I would say Virginia Landman and Sandra Zebra. They were. The problem with being a testosterone poisoned teenager is a girl is a girl.
Yeah.
and that is always a little in the way of being a friend.
Yeah. Yeah, it sounds like something out of Seinfeld.
Yeah, right.
So, did you have just one high school sweetheart?
High school. I think
This is high school graduation.
Yeah, and that's Margaret, or as she was known around the halls in the high school, Maggie the Cat.
Really?
she was strong medicine. I think so.
Yeah.
As far as I can remember, she was the only real connection I made.
So it was stuff like going steady, and is that the terms you would use, or?
Yeah, going steady.
Yeah.
Yeah, or having exchanged rings, which means you hung them around your neck, not on your fingers.
And was that class rings?
It might have been some kind of ring, anyway.
Yeah.
So yeah, there was that attempt to make some kind of or get some kind of a commitment. Not so much get some kind of commitment.
Yeah.
And Margaret and I hooked up at, I think, 15, 16, and it continued until I was 17.
Oh, okay.
And off in college. She came to my university visited me in the first quarter I was there. So it lasted a while.
Yeah, that was kind of, like half of high school at least.
Yeah. And she was a country girl. She lived in the country.
Do you know where she is now?
She is a minister in the, I think, Lutheran church somewhere in Iowa.
Oh, okay. So she kind of stayed local.
I know that from the 50th.
I see. Okay.
High school class reunion.
So of that period before in high school, before you kind of went off on your own, do you have any standout moments or memories that kind of you feel?
You happen to ask that question right after talking about Margaret, so.
Oh no.
Yeah, there are some standout memories. Yeah, definitely. Gosh, all kinds of crazy stuff. Like there happened to be a billboard headed east from the town on the two-lane highway that came out of town, all two-lane highways, and it was blank. So we manufactured 5-foot letters and went out there and nailed them to that billboard that said "Go Lions," which was the Lions was the name of the teams at the high school, and we did that. We thought we were being very surreptitious.
Yeah, it's very devious.
Yeah, right.
You could have put profanity up there.
Yeah, and that comes to mind. Things like there was, as far as I know, there was one divorced, pretty young woman in town who was probably 40, and she had a date one evening, and we noticed it, and so we stalked them.
Oh God!
And the lights off, crept up behind them on a country road where they were necking or whatever they were doing, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
It was relatively
small town stuff.
Small town stuff, it's like something right out of American Graffiti.
Yeah, yeah. Sounds like it.
Funny stuff.
So, you ended up at the University of South Dakota for football, and then.
Well, no, it wasn't so much football.
Did you have multiple choices of where you wanted to go?
I think I was accepted at Drake University, which was a private university in Des Moines, which would have been a very different experience because Des Moines, small as it is, was an urban setting more so than the University of South Dakota. I was looking for a place that would accept my grades, which was sort of like a B average out of high school, and that had a dormitory room because the post-war baby boom thing was starting to happen a bit, and there weren't a lot of dormitory beds available.
Huh.
Importantly, who would help me get a national student defense loan to fund the whole thing. Now, I think my tuition was $300, and you could live through the semester for maybe $2,000.
Yeah.
Which is crazy in today's perspective, but it was real money then.
Yeah.
And my dad said, I haven't prepared a fund for you to go to school, you or your sister. My sister was already in college. He said, I will countersign any loan you get.
Okay. So you had to go out and get the loan, and he was going to be your undersign it, all of them.
And he did. Mm. He countersigned it. And so by the time I was out of school, I was swimming in debt.
Sounds like today.
By the standards of those days, which I believe was $10,000. It doesn't sound like anything, but that was a year.
Yeah, if you go to a conversion calculator, though, it's going to look like a lot.
That's a year's salary in those days.
Yeah.
A good salary. And then I ended up in the Army.
So you got your bachelor's degree in journalism, or?
That was the curriculum that I followed. It is a bachelor's degree in liberal arts,
I see. Okay.
but that was my interest was in what is today called media, I think.
Mm.
So we studied newspaper journalism, radio journalism, television journalism.
Which must have been kind of a newer thing,
Yeah,
right?
it was pretty glitzy in those days. And to be on TV, and the years of the kinescope, which is aiming a television camera at a screen showing a movie, and then an undergraduate interest in business. I also dabbled in the arts, uh, particularly illustration, drawing, that sort of thing.
So you actually took classes in that stuff?
Yeah.
Oh, that's
I
cool.
remember being sent out to the museum to make a drawing of statuary and animals in the museum. And so the nice thing about a small university like University of South Dakota is that you could do so many things.
Yeah.
I was the editor of the humor magazine. I played that little spate of football. I was editor of the yearbook. My senior year, I belonged to a fraternity. I designed Rose Parade level floats for the summer, for the homecoming float parade.
How big was that university?
Oh, uh, today it's like 20,000. Then it was maybe 5,
Okay.
so small.
Yeah.
And it was a good school for me, and it was just far enough away from home, which is what I really wanted to get is
Yeah.
away from home. So it was fine, and I met my first wife there.
So she was a fellow student.
Yeah, she was I think a year ahead of me, as I recall.
Just because you looked so mature.
No, I think she was young for her class,
Mm.
and we met. We'd known of each other before going there because she was a Lyon County person,
Oh, okay.
and she was a sorority girl, and I was a fraternity guy.
So you guys met through the Greek system?
I kind of like that, as I recall, anyway.
Do you remember actually the first time you met her or anything like that?
Not really.
Yeah.
I had a little trailer house there. After my senior year, I talked my maternal grandfather into helping me buy a trailer house and moved it up there to the university. And I have a picture of her in front of that trailer house. So vague memory of all of that. But anyway, we got together then, and so I was commissioned in the Army through ROTC, graduated from the university, started my first job in advertising in a nearby city, and got married all in the same week.
Wow.
In 1965.
My goodness. It's a lot at once.
Yeah, I was a man in a hurry.
Mm-hmm.
And delighted to have gotten a job with Moselle and Jacobs, which later became a very large advertising agency throughout the country. But it had started in Omaha and had a branch office in Sioux City, Iowa, and that's where I worked for them on the Wells Blue Buddy dairy account.
Okay.
Ice cream and milk.
Ice cream, yeah.
Ice cream and milk. And that is an example of preparation meeting opportunity.
Yeah.
I'd gone around Sioux City, which is where we, the young married couple, just married, wanted to live because she had a teaching job there. And I knocked on doors, went through the Yellow Pages, which is the only way in
Yeah.
those days, and went around to printing companies, to radio stations, to television stations, to anybody having to do with mass media, to advertising agencies, just walking up, knocking on the door, and saying, "I want to work for you." You know,
Wow.
go away, kid. You know, that kind of thing.
This sort of thing doesn't work at all anymore.
Yeah, and Lloyd Graff, who was the um, office managing partner for about 5 people in the smallest Bozell and Jacobs office in the world, said, "Okay, kid, you can work here for the summer." And I said, "Good, great. I got to go off to the army in the fall." And he said, "Okay." So there I was, and they didn't really have a job for me. I did a little this, a little that, and it was apparent that they didn't need.
It was like being an intern?
Yeah, sub intern. So I can remember
Is
it.
that important?
No, at one point I developed a table tent. Uh, Promoting myself internally for more work.
I know the feeling. Give me something to do.
Yeah, right. And it worked. It gave me more to do. But what interestingly did work was several chapters forward, that fellow who hired me in Sioux City had moved to San Francisco, and he was responsible for me getting to San Francisco.
Oh, I see.
So knocking on those doors, finding Lloyd, got me to San Francisco.
Huh.
Could not have possibly known that that was going to be a result. But,
right.
But there
So
it
you
is.
kept in touch with him after you finished that summer?
Yeah, he knew where I was and what I was doing, and you know, at that level. You know.
So at this point, was Vietnam happening yet?
No. The reason I joined ROTC, because I asked the older fraternity brothers, you know, on the one hand, there's this 8 o'clock class in tidy whities out there doing jumping jacks, or you could be in olive drab going to learn about war. Which do you think I ought to do? And they said, "Oh, go with ROTC. You graduate, they send you to Europe, you spend 2 years in Germany. It's beautiful. It's just, they pay you for it. It's like paid vacation." And I thought, "Well, okay, fine." So I did that. In my junior year, a regular Army guy came by and said, "We need you to sign this paper." And we kind of mumbled, "Well, what is it?" You know. And he said, "Just sign it." So
What was it?
it was going from reserve to active duty status.
Oh, really?
And so we had suddenly lost all our flexibility in the matter.
Huh.
So we ended up that fall, after the advertising agency experience in Sioux City, my first wife and I went down to Fort Benning, Georgia, which for Iowa kids was like going to Croatia.
Yeah.
It was just, we had no idea what that was.
Yeah.
I remember we went to a Baptist church Sunday morning.
Yeah.
And it was just wonderful and amazing. They were so friendly and so welcoming, and it was just a sweet experience. And then the training. I remember one morning, very chilly, very damp, standing on top of the exhaust vent of an N1 tank in the forest with my poncho blossomed out so that the tank exhaust would come up into the poncho and warm me up. We had slept all night, you know. It was just, they were seeing what we were made of. So
yeah, they were putting you through the ringer, right?
Yeah, yeah. So that was infantry officers training. I was never an infantry officer. I mean, I wore the insignia, but that's not what I did.
Yeah.
but I had that.
You had to do the
I
training.
had to do the training.
And you weren't just an infantry officer because you had a college degree? Is that what made the difference, or?
The Army, in its infinite wisdom, God knows how these decisions are made, decided that the young men that they had captured who were had law degrees, hadn't passed the bar yet, but
Yeah.
had law degrees, and journalism background, which was mine, would be good spies. That is to say, collecting information on people and vetting them for top secret clearances and so forth. Good interviewers.
Yeah.
And so we found ourselves in a classroom in Fort Holabird, Maryland, which was an old Colgate soap factory in Baltimore, and learning how to be spies in the tradition of the Cold War in Germany. They taught us how to tail people. That sort
Really?
of thing. Yeah.
Well, did that seem like fantasy at all? While you, I mean, it seemed must have been a little surreal that thinking that you would do any of that.
How to pick locks? Well, we were just kids. We didn't know. If they said we need to teach you how to pick locks, I said, okay, sounds neat to me.
Yeah.
So all of that was going along just fine. And then one day they said, change of plans. We're going to teach you how to deal with situations in Southeast Asia. And we said, where is Southeast Asia? And they took us out to a field there at the fort, and they had built a replica of a Vietnamese village. And we started all over with a whole new perspective about what we were to do, which made no sense because this was a part of the Army that didn't really have a mission that made sense in that counterinsurgency circumstance. But they were determined, once you have a branch of the Army, you're not going to give it up because it doesn't make sense.
Mm-hmm.
You got the money, we're going to spend it. So there I was on my way to Vietnam. And what we did over there was make sure that the safe was safe, so it couldn't be easily opened.
Yeah.
Well, what difference does it make if the Viet Cong can't open the safe if they've killed everybody on the base? They can't open the safe, but who cares? They'll eventually get it open if they really want to. It's out in the jungle somewhere. It was just nuts. And we do things like, we want you boys to go down and hang out at the bar and listen. Make sure that our soldiers are not giving up where they're going in the morning to the bar girls.
Huh.
And we said, you buying the beer? He said, yeah, we'll buy the beer. I said, sure, we'll go. Yeah, you bet. It was just like absolute nonsense all the time.
It sounds like a TV show or something,
Yeah, it was sort of like MASH.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
when was it that you ended up being sent overseas?
Well, I graduated from the university in 65 and 66.
Okay. So was it right after Maryland when they had a sudden change of plans?
Yeah. In fact, it was the only time, I'm pretty sure, I never drove all the way across the country. I drove from Maryland to Iowa. Then there was a hiatus of the Army and graduate school. And then I drove from the Midwest to California. So I did it in 2 segments. I've never done it all at once.
Yeah.
So yeah, the Vietnam was started a year after graduated from the University of South Dakota.
So it started in 1966?
66, 66, 67. And I was out of there just before the Tet Offensive, which was good because
that's when it got real messy, right?
It occurred very near where I was.
Oh, okay.
I would have been in the midst of that because I was in Saigon by that time. And
So how long were you over there?
just exactly a year.
Okay, so
And
I
so
mean, it wasn't very long in the scheme of things, right?
it was a draft circumstance, unlike today where it's all volunteer.
Yeah.
So there were lots of us, and they didn't need to have us in country more than a year. So I trained for a year. I was there for a year, and then I ended up asking for an early out, and you could do that if you wanted to go to graduate school and other reasons. But
Did they care if you were married?
I think that had an influence.
Yeah, I would imagine.
You know, especially if you had children.
Mm-hmm.
But so I ended up. They said, "Well, where would you like to go?" And I said, "Well, I've been accepted at the University of Missouri for graduate school, so near there would be useful." So they stationed me in Kansas City, which was my first occasion to live in a high-rise apartment, which was interesting. And our mission there was to go around and interview people about young men for the most part, who needed a security clearance. So we would go around and knock on doors and say, "Hi, I'm Special Agent Pettengill from the U.S. Army, and we're checking up on Bobby. Is Bobby a good guy? Does he do drugs? You know, whatever. Anything they would."
So it was determining whether people could join the military?
No, they could get a secret clearance.
So whether their clearance level could be raised or not?
Or they could have one at all.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And then the other odd thing was that Independence, Missouri is now essentially a suburb of Kansas City and the home of Harry Truman. And it was clear that he was getting of an age that he was going to die at some point. And they wanted to have all of the security arrangements for that funeral set in advance. And that was one of my jobs.
Really?
Was to help set up the funeral arrangements.
Huh.
And I remember that because I got to go to his house. You know, so it was
like before he passed away, or
yeah, he wasn't there, but
oh, okay.
But you know, it was that was one of my missions. One of the things I did while I was in Kansas City.
A little piece of history.
Yeah, and I also remember taking a funky little train from Kansas City to Columbus, Missouri, where the university is, halfway across Missouri. It had wooden seats. It was like something right out of 1880.
Wow, still running.
Well, it didn't have a coal-fired engine anymore, but it was really a throwback.
So, you didn't finish that in school there, did you, or did you?
I was studying for a master's degree in journalism there, and it had a very fine reputation as a journalism school. I never wanted to be a journalist. I was interested in theory of mass communication.
Uh-huh.
So I went from there to Chicago to a large advertising agency.
And how was it you ended up with that job? Did you know somebody?
No, it was right out of the. In those days, I don't know if when you were at Cal it was true or not, but in those days, when it was time to leave the university, you went to the recruiting office, and there were recruiters from companies lined up there.
Oh yeah, we had career fairs that had stuff like that. Yeah.
I was flown back to Delaware to talk to DuPont, and I talked to General Electric seriously, and several advertising agencies, and ended up with an advertising agency. I had no criteria. The only criteria I had was
a degree.
No, what are you paying?
Oh, I see. So you were gonna.
Yeah, and the ad agency had the biggest number.
So what? At that age and point, you're like, what was a good salary?
Starting salary.
Yeah.
Well, and I have no idea what it would be like today. Probably 80 to 100,000, probably.
Huh.
Then you do the backward math. That was $10,000.
Huh.
But $10,000 rented you a fancy 3-bedroom apartment, 2-bath apartment with garages,
Wow.
and
Was this in Chicago?
it was in a leafy suburb just outside of Chicago.
I see.
Yeah,
Okay. And how long were you in Chicago?
that was 2.5 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
I remember you saying something about how awful the winter was.
Oh,
Not only cold, but windy.
cold, windy. The moment I remember in particular was waiting for a bus at one point to get over to the railroad station to take this train out to the suburb. It wasn't that far, but I was not driving. And I was looking down at the pavement, and Chicago winters are, it'll get warm, then it'll get cold. It'll get warm, it'll get cold. And so there, and it would snow in between, and so there were layers of ice. You could sort of see this geological
Yeah.
pattern of the ice.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about.
And then, and trapped in that ice were things.
Really?
Cigarette butts, pieces of paper, and so forth.
City snow.
Yeah, and it was, I was looking down at it and I said, this is just awful. And it was cold and windy.
Yeah.
So windy, in fact, where I worked on the lakeside, they had ropes going from the door out to the curb.
Really?
So hand over hand to get out to
Oh my
the...
gosh.
Yeah. Yeah, it was really windy
Yeah.
and cold. I like Chicago. It's a big, brawny town, but it's not a pleasant weather.
Yeah, I've only been there in the summer, and I remember it being hot and sticky.
Yeah, that can happen too. Yeah. So, I like to... You want to eat?
Sure.
We'll do that.